This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Stick around until the very end to hear more. The Union of American States. In 1921, 10,000 miners in Blair Mountain, West Virginia created a makeshift army under the leadership of Union organizer Bill Blizzard, their goal being to fight against the coal barons who had crushed any attempt at forming a union to improve working conditions. Refusing to take up arms against the sympathetic cause, many National Guardsmen defected to the side of the miners against the government which had sent them there in the first place. An insurrection was declared by the federal government, which began to employ chemical weapons against the rebels, who retreated into the hills of Appalachia, waging guerrilla warfare on federal forces. In response to this, President Harding tightened restrictions on unions nationwide, hoping to discourage similar actions, initiating the Year of Troubles in 1922, where all across the Rust Belt union workers went on strike, seeing to the escalation of Union-federal tensions. On July 4th, 1923, Bill Blizzard and the army he had created from the coal miners of West Virginia marched on Charleston, proclaiming that the Second American Revolution had begun. The Unionists would go on to win victory after victory in the Rust Belt and even in New York City, where independently organized unions would fight across northern Pennsylvania and New Jersey to meet up with the main Union forces in the Great Lakes region. The death knell for the federal government came when southern states declared independence as the Second Confederate States of America on February 8, 1924. The Union of American States now stood free, electing Bill Blizzard as its first president, who chose to establish a new capital in Logan County, West Virginia, where most of the war had been run from. The state currently faces enemies on all sides, however many hope that just like at Blair Mountain, they will persevere. The Maori Empire. After arriving on New Zealand from Hawaii in 1300, the Maori settled down and established a society across both islands. Upon first contact with the European Abel Tasman in December of 1642, instead of fighting with the foreigner, the Maori invited him in and learned many European shipbuilding techniques along with other technologies. It would develop similarly to the way the Japanese had by adopting the ways of the West, soon recognizing the power struggle between the European powers and how it might threaten their security if they remained underdeveloped. In the years just prior to James Cook's exploration of the South Pacific and proposed colonization of Australia, the Maori would begin their own settlement of the neighboring island continent. Being far more advanced than the Aboriginal natives, they are able to conquer great portions of the coast with ease, subjugating the Aboriginals as servant laborers and later as second-class citizens. With the Maori having established a large enough population in the southern coast, Britain would be forced to settle the northern and western coasts, leaving Australia divided between Britain's empire on one side and the Maori Empire on the other. The Dominion of Albion. Having suffered a staggering defeat in the 7 Years' War, Britain had forever lost its Indian colonies to the French. Shortly thereafter, the American colonies fully turned against Britain to pursue independence, recognizing that the crown was both unable to protect them and a drain upon their resources. The once empire was left discouraged and despondent, feelings which would only intensify as Britain entered into decades of decline, finding itself locked out of the continent by the now unmatched France, while its overseas possessions slowly vanished, leaving it virtually isolated from the rest of the world. Britain's people soon developed revolutionary sentiments, fueled by the broken promises of the unfulfilled Industrial Revolution, advances in natural science, and the rise of utopian idealism as an escape from the woes plaguing the Isles. The 1840s would prove the breaking point for Britain. Facing famine, inflation, and the assassination of the Queen, the people broke out in revolt, seizing power for themselves and replacing the Old Kingdom with the newly formed Dominion of Albion. The Dominion established a harsh social structure built on premises of eugenics and social Darwinism, creating a strict hierarchy based upon naturally inherited traits. Albion remains weary of the world around her, still isolated but keeping a steady eye on France and the North Sea, its future remaining uncertain in the changing world, though its capabilities and aspirations for power rise year by year. The Theodore Roosevelt. After the disastrous election of 1912, many Americans refused to accept the sheer tomfoolery of Woodrow Wilson as their president. They instead looked to the powerful goodness of Theodore Roosevelt, then leader of the Progressive Party, to lead them instead. Roosevelt's supporters carved out 7 territories in the Great Plains and seceded from the Union. During the following Civil War, Theodore Roosevelt led his new Rough Riders all the way to Washington, D.C., broke into the White House, snatched Wilson, carried him all the way back to Roosevelt's estate in the seceded territories, and chucked him into a washing machine in order to clean out his humbuggery. It was at this moment that the people knew Roosevelt was to become their god emperor. Roosevelt then managed to single-handedly craft a potion of immortality, allowing him to reign over the Roosevelt for all eternity. The Egyptian Hittite Empire. In the mid-13th century BC, Pharaoh Ramses II had married a Hittite princess to make peace between their two empires, and to form a joint front against the rival Assyrians. The pharaoh had many children born of several women, but nearly all of them were lost to disease, accidents, and assassinations, the Hittites intent on securing the throne for one of their own and potentially turning Egypt into a client state. When Ramses died, his only living male heir was the son he had with the Hittite princess. However, not long after the boy was crowned pharaoh, the Hittite Empire fell into a succession crisis, allowing him to step in and stake his own claim to the throne, establishing a political union between the two empires. Succeeding in pushing back threats such as the Sea People and the Assyrians, the Union Empire gained much prosperity under the stable leadership of a series of strong rulers, enduring for centuries until it was ultimately conquered by Persia. The GrecoGepid Empire. Upon the fall of the Western Roman Empire, various groups in the east split off to form their own nations, one of these having been the hostile Germanic Gepids of Dacia. Despite this hostility, the threat of invasion posed by the Huns, Scythians, and Slavs would drive the Gepids to seek alliance with Byzantium. Becoming an essential buffer state for Eastern Rome in exchange for military and developmental support, eventually seeing total integration into the empire. Over the centuries, Byzantium's loss of territory in the Middle East drives it to focus more heavily upon its Anatolian and Balkan possessions, fortifying Europe's southeastern gate. Preventing the influx of Slavs and Turks into the region, these remnant Byzantine territories develop a dominant Greco-Gepid culture which would endure well into the modern era. The Holy Crusader Empire. The year is 1250 and the 7th Crusade has begun. The Crusaders seeing a tremendous surge in their numbers as news of the Mongol invasion destabilizing Islamic hold in the Middle East emboldens them to seize this opportunity. They succeed in occupying resource-rich Egypt, which supplies the Crusaders as they move on to the Holy Land. After crushing the Muslims along the Levant and driving them into Mongol-occupied lands, they now face a tempting prospect. The opportunity to advance further along the South Anatolian coast, link up with Byzantium and push the enemy far into the east, retaking the whole of Anatolia. Risking it all, the gamble is taken, and in the end the Holy Crusader Kingdom was established, stretching from the shores of Tripoli to the Persian border, succeeding Byzantium and bringing upon the King of France who had led this crusade the title of Emperor of the Romans, additionally bringing France closer to the Church and as a consequence triggering a fierce rivalry with the Holy Roman Empire. Greater Transylvania. The vampires that would come to rule the land of Transylvania originated from the mountains of Caucasia. Under the great leadership of Dracul, they were able to conquer the region of Transylvania through direct warfare and through territorial purchase. Rather than expel the humans from their newly acquired lands, a system of enthrallment was favored, using the humans as thralls to work the land during the daytime. Transylvania's regular army was largely comprised of human thralls, while vampire warriors would be transported in crates for nighttime operations. Using this tactic of unending battle, they were able to conquer vast amounts of neighboring territories, threatening the empires of man and initiating the Great Vampiric Wars. The Republic of Franklin. After their attempt to join the Union as the state of Franklin was blocked by North and South Carolina, North Carolinians living west of the Appalachian Mountains moved to fully secede from the Union entirely as the Republic of Franklin. Attempts by the North Carolina militia to conquer the young republic were foiled by President John Sevier and the Franklinite Army. Founding itself upon the ideal of the isolated frontiersman, Franklin existed in a state of extreme decentralization bordering on anarchy, going so far as to not have an official currency in favor of bartering for goods and services. This pleased the majority of the Republic who had fiercely resisted any government interference in their lives. Likewise, Franklin's policies were attractive to other groups who felt their ways of life were threatened. Many Indian tribes voted to join Franklin rather than see assimilation into the United States, and a handful of predominantly Scotch-Irish settlements in the US sympathetic to Franklin gradually saw themselves integrated into the new republic, though this went largely unrecognized by the US. The Republic also became a favorite destination for runaway slaves, as the extremely decentralized government couldn't capture them even if it wanted to. When a large number of Indian tribes and several disconnected colonial settlements in Louisiana decided to join Franklin, the French sold the territory to the US before any more land could break away. By this point, Franklin would have developed a large albeit spread out population and thus adopted some centralizing policies to better protect its borders, especially newly acquired lands undefended by natural barriers. In time, Franklinites would settle the Mexican state of Texas, preparing it for eventual conquest. The United Kingdoms of Britannia and the Eire. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the Celtic Britons, previously tribal, used what the Romans left behind to form a functioning and united kingdom. After years of raids by the Anglo-Saxons and hostility with its immediate neighbors, the Britons managed to negotiate a union with the Picts following a royal marriage to bring about peace and stability to the island of Britain, while at the same time an effort was made to entice the Irish into joining the union through the trading of exotic goods and the sharing of advanced technology. existing as co-equal kingdoms contributing to the national economy via agriculture in Ireland, textile, masonry, and smithing works in Scotland, and port trade and fishing in England, the three would exist in a balanced harmony for their mutual security and advancement. The US of Z thanks you for watching. A big thank you to everyone who submitted an alternate country, and of course many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace is a platform which provides you all the tools necessary to build your own website. Loaded with social media integrations, streamlined e-commerce capabilities, and powerful community and blogging tools, Squarespace allows you to connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated members-only content. Manage your members, send email communications, and leverage audience insights all in one easy-to-use platform. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/MonsterZ to save 10% on your first purchase of a website or domain. Links will be in the description. Support your legion by liking the video, or join our ranks by subscribing for more. Mr. Z,